Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott. There are a lot of different battery chargers and third-party batteries on the market at this point. I've spent time, I think, with at least 4 different third-party brand batteries for my Sony cameras and a few for my Canon cameras at this point. The llano concept that I'm covering here today is in theory just a better way to ensure your batteries are always charged and also to have plenty of power backup. This is a kit that comes with a really impressive dual bay charger along with 2 different batteries that come with it. And so you have lots of power backup for either your Canon or Sony cameras, and they both come in a couple of different configurations depending upon what Sony or Canon camera that you need. This is a really well-equipped kit that comes in for a little under $100 US. And so this review is going to break down how well does the charger work and how well do the batteries work. Starting with the charger itself, as I unboxed it, I was impressed with the presentation, but even more so with what all is included in the package. You've got your batteries, you've got your charger, there's a manual, there's a wrist strap. I don't know why you'd want to carry this around, but who knows, maybe you would. There is a pouch to store everything in, a charging cable. The one thing that you don't get is a power brick for AC power to plug into the wall. So it's assuming you have a way to plug a USB-C cable into something. And if you don't, obviously that could be an additional purchase. For probably most of us at this point, we have multiple ways of plugging a USB-C cable into power through some way. I was also impressed by the overall design. It's kind of a clever design for we photographers in that it's designed to look essentially like a camera. Instead of the actual lens here, you've got an LCD screen that will show the state of charge individually for each of the 2 batteries. You've got a button here that in this case I can press it and it will power up the LCD screen to show me what is going on with the state of charge inside. Very, very nice materials, soft touch materials. Everything is very nicely made, up to including even the way that the batteries click in. It's a very definite, there's nothing loose there, they're not going to fall out. And so you have a really nice feel of precision in the way that it all comes together. They've even got a slot here for an SD card to actually lock in, just as it would in kind of locking into your camera. And so you have the place to store a backup SD card. Now, of course, if your camera uses something other than SD, you're out of luck, but most of them still have at least a single SD card slot there. One of the interesting things I found is that, as expected, when you have it plugged in, it obviously is going to show you the state of charge while they're charging, but I also like the fact that it will allow you to draw just a tiny bit of current off the batteries themselves to show the LCD readout for the state of charge if you click the button there. And so obviously then after 30 seconds or so, the screen will power back off, and so it's not wasting battery, but you do have the opportunity, even if you're not plugged in, to evaluate what the state of the charge of the batteries inside are. So how accurate is that readout? I've tested with both of these. I actually think that the Canon version may be very slightly more accurate than what the Sony was, but as far as what the Sony was, I did multiple tests, and when I had the battery inside the charger, it showed the state of charge at either 78 or 80%. I ran it multiple times and I got 78 one, 80 another. I put the battery into the camera and the camera showed a state of charge at 92%. I would say that was pretty typically the case, that the case may be maybe slightly underreported what the camera itself did, and so I actually would probably prefer it that way. I'd like to be pleasantly surprised when I put the battery in the camera and show a little bit higher state of charge there than what I saw elsewhere. So I was interested in seeing, on paper, this is rated at 18 watts, and so interested to see how that actually played out. So I used one of my Blue Eddy power stations, actually a model that I'm currently reviewing right now, and I wanted to see what these were actually pulling and then compare it to the Sony charger, the trickle charging in the camera itself, and see how it all played out. And so additionally, when I plugged this in with one battery inside, it was drawing at 13 watts, and it took about 170 minutes for it to go from 0% to 100%. So why is that? Well, when you get up to about 80% of charge, as is typical with most quality, battery management software, powering and charging devices, you get to about 80%, and rather than trying to cram the top end of the battery, which actually starts to decay battery life quickly, it will start to slow down and trickle charge. So towards the end, it was 5 watts and then 3 watts as it slowed down to almost nothing at the end to allow that to give you as many recharge cycles as possible in the battery itself. And so, you know, I tried then using just using the actual camera to charge in camera in my my Canon or Sony cameras. I have the ability to charge in camera, and those drew at about 12 to 13 watts. So a pretty similar state of charge compared to the llano charger. Now, of course, the advantage is that I can put 2 batteries into this, and then I'm drawing 17 to 18 watts, and that's where the actual 18 watts come in. And so the advantage there is that I can actually charge 2 batteries for not much slower a time than what I can charge a single battery. And that's where probably the genius is of this, is that if you need to charge multiple batteries, you can do so much more quickly. And of course, you have the advantage of being able to charge 2 at a time versus 1 at a time. So how'd that compare to the Sony charger? Now this Sony charger, this is the BC-QZ1 charger. So I will note about this, I have it because I have multiple of these because they came included with my cameras. I do know, however, from reviewing Sony cameras that they tend to only come with the high-end, expensive cameras. So you may not have one of these included with your camera when you purchase it. And if you're going to buy it individually, it costs $100. So it costs as much for just the charger as what you get the llano charger and 2 batteries as well for. So as from a value proposition, this obviously makes a lot more sense. This charger is rated at 150 minutes to charge a battery. So remember, it took about 170 minutes here. Now, when I compared them side by side, it was kind of an interesting result because I started off 2 batteries fully depleted, 1 in here, 1 in the llano charger. Initially, this drew at 26 watts when plugged into the AC power of the Bluetti charging station that I was using, whereas this is only drawing 13 watts. And so in theory, it should charge twice as fast. That's actually not the way that it played out. When I got to a place where as I was monitoring to them, neither one was drawing any measurable current at all. So it was right at the end of topping off the very top of the battery. That was about 2 hours into the process, and neither one of them showed 100% yet, but when I took the batteries out and put them into the camera, they were like 98, 99%. So interestingly, though this starts off a lot faster, it didn't necessarily charge the battery faster overall. I would say that it is very slightly faster, but not in any kind of big, meaningful way. So my conclusion on the charger is that it's probably a little bit slower than this dedicated Sony charger, but your advantage is obviously you've got dual bays. Your connection source is USB-C, which is going to be much more flexible than this kind of old school proprietary end here that is only for a certain charge cable. Whereas with the llano, you can go with a smaller overall package, even though it's 2 dual bay. And then also you have the chance of charging off of anything that provides USB-C power, which obviously is a lot of devices compared to that AC power. This using DC allows you just more flexibility for that whole charging process. So anyway, I liked that point. And of course, obviously I like the value proposition. I like the cleaner interface. With the Sony charger, all you're getting is just the 3 green bars. So a very kind of sloppy way of showing state of charge. This is, down to a single percentage point. That's obviously much more precise and more useful to let you know where you're at in the whole charging process. So how well do the batteries work? I've been using these batteries exclusively for the last 5 weeks. Now, as is pretty common with third-party batteries, they're actually rated technically at higher than what the first-party Sony battery is. The llano battery is rated at 2400 mAh, the Sony battery at 2280 mAh. So on paper, 120 mAh advantage for the llano battery. What I found in actuality in using them is that when I did a runtime test, I decided to do a real-world test using one of the most kind of high power draw things that you can do in a modern camera, and that is to shoot higher resolution 4K video. So I shot 4K 60 video in my A7R Mark V, started off first with the llano battery at 100% state of charge, and I used 160 gigabyte it's a CFA card in there, and so I had lots of room to record. So I started the test for the llano battery at 7:22 a.m. And at 8:57, the battery died on me. And so that was an hour and 35 minutes. At that point, it was kind of a moot point anyway. It was showing that my 160 gig card was essentially just about full. And so the battery went first, but the card was just about to go. So after allowing time for the camera to cool down, I did a Sony test, started the Sony test at 9:20 a.m. using a fully charged Sony battery, same parameters, and it ran till 10:56. So that's an hour and 36 minutes. However, a difference being is that here it was the card that showed exhausted. The battery still showed about 5% battery life left. And so my conclusion is that even though the llano is higher capacity, it actually, in terms of real world use, it is very slightly, about 5 to 6%, it is very slightly less capacity for real world use than what an OEM Sony battery is. So is the Sony battery better? I would say yes. But on a positive note, I've used these batteries exclusively for the last 5 weeks. I've not seen one warning, so zero compatibility issues, at least at this stage. So that's huge. I will note that I think that the camera was maybe a split second slower powering on, probably some kind of power check that it runs. It takes a little bit longer with the llano battery, but it's so slight that it was just an impression I had. I can't verify it because the time is still too short. But I think just a split second delay longer in powering on the camera. But outside of that, zero compatibility issues. An OEM Sony battery costs $78 per battery. So you get two batteries, 160 bucks. If you were to get two batteries plus the charger, that's 260 bucks. Whereas here we have $100 for the dual bay charger and two batteries to go with it. So you can question other things. I mean, obviously the Sony stuff is probably just a hair better, but the llano is very, very close, within a few percentage points. You can question how long the reliability is going to be. Fit and finish seems to be good, but obviously I've only used them for 5 weeks, so I can't answer that question. I can say this though, on the value proposition, there's no question that this is a very strong value, and it's also a really well executed package in terms of the materials, in terms of the functionality. I've really liked it. I probably will continue to use it, and that's really the best endorsement that I can give. I'm Dustin Abbott, and if you want more information, you can check out the link to the Amazon listing for the llano battery charger and kit. And as noted, you can get this in either Sony or Canon configurations and a couple of different battery options. And the price will vary a little bit. Smaller capacity batteries are going to cost a little bit less. Obviously, these batteries cost just a little bit more. So check it out there if you want more information. As always, thanks for watching. Have a great day, and let the light in.